not only being left behind by the forces of globalization, but now being left behind by an era of radical automation driven by some of these underlying technologies, and what happens to our societal fabric as we kind of transition through this. So this is a really big, broad area, and we're going to try to explore various different aspects of it. So why don't we start with, we'll start right at the far end with Sheldon. Sheldon, you're an AI guy. And one of the biggest disruptors that in many ways most people think of as kind of an unknown coefficient in this new equation is, the impact of AI. So in broad terms, how do you see AI changing the work landscape?
Great question. I think in the short to medium term, we're basically seeing AI take away the rote kind of laborious work that humans don't like to do anyways, right? So there's a certain arduous element to aspects of our job that AI can do really well. Certain levels of automation, and what we often say is that, the way to think about working alongside AI is to think of it as a collaborator, right? It doesn't replace your job, but it basically allows you to be more productive in certain creative realms that AI cannot yet do. So, for example, we have startups right now that are using machine learning to do radiology image analysis, and it does it better, according to most studies, than most radiologists themselves. But we still don't have insight into how it's reaching those conclusions, and when it gets something wrong, it gets it egregiously wrong. And so right now, the way most doctors are leveraging AI is not as a replacement, but as an augmenter to what they're doing, right? There was a study that the AI is 90% accurate, the human is 87% accurate, but combined, they're 99.7% accurate. So right now, we think of it as enhancing our capabilities in certain realms. But in the long term, when we think about AI's explosive growth and its explosive capabilities, the question is what happens when it starts to encroach on creative type work that we think is the domain of human beings narrowly, right? So one of the talks I give is on computational creativity, which is the ability of machines to imagine and to create works of creative value that we thought were only the realm of human beings. What happens when a machine can truly write a sonnet that is appealing to us, when it can argue or put together a legal argument with the cogent strength of a lawyer? That's not yet in the immediate future, but it will be there, we think, in the medium to long range, and that's a fascinating question.
So you're saying we might be able to get rid of lawyers?
That's the ultimate thing, which is a world without lawyers is what AI was designed to do. Yeah.
That's aspirational. So that's.
How much does AI charge per hour?
Well, that's an interesting question, Alan. I mean, how much do they charge for it? So you're kind of saying that AI is going to make some of us much more productive, which is great, and it's going to do some of the work that a lot of us find kind of, drudgery. What happens to the rest of us?
Yeah, just as the Industrial Revolution, decimated entire industries, it created new ones, as you say, that five out of 6 students today will find work that we don't even know exists. One of the interesting paradox about AI is that it's really phenomenal at some things, but some basic things that a 3-year-old can do in terms of physical manipulation of objects and so forth, it's still really poor at. And so we'll have to find our way into this unique area where there is still human contribution to labor. And so we don't know what that work will look like yet. But we do know that there are certain things that AI is really terrible at right now, generalizing knowledge, for example. There's a fascinating study where they studied child altruism, and they put a 3-year-old in front of a man who's trying to get books into a shelf, and he repeatedly walks into the shelf, and the child has never seen this before, and 5 out of 6 children will intuitively walk and open the door for him. We still have no idea how to teach AI to generalize morality in unique situations. And so that quintessential human capability is something that we will have to increasingly leverage in the workforce when AI starts to, again, take over certain areas of automation that are very prevalent in the workforce right now.
Now Laurie, So if AI is going to be such a big kind of important component of this future, one of the challenges that a bunch of people have been kind of looking at are the inherent biases in the underlying data sets, because AI engines learn from all the data that we're creating, and we're capturing data at absolutely unprecedented rates, right? It's kind of an exponential curve on that side. How concerned are you that we're learning the wrong things, that there is bias in the underlying data set, that as smart as these engines are, they're going to be making the wrong decisions?
I think the first comment I would make is a build on what you just said, is that before AI replaces anything, there's going to be a bloat. It's going to cause extra work, because the people who are involved now in doing the analytics are going to have to train it. They're going to have to retrain it. They're going to have to study it. So I think before we get to the holy grail of automation and AI being able to take away work, it's going to cause work. And so I think there's a bit of a fallacy in that it's going to automate a whole bunch of things and it's going to make everything easier right now. So I think we're in that point of transition. And I work in an environment, and having worked in and outside of financial services, but my reality each day is that we're pumping out about 1,500 pieces of analytics annually. A fraction of those I would have in a world where I can put them into some form of machine learning. And then to your comment or your latter question around what proportion of them would I trust with a bias, we're still training a number of things, and I would say segmenting our analytics to ascertain which pieces are appropriate to be able to put in and test, so that they can go in a world where we can actually put them into some form of machine learning. And I think the world is flirting with that. Like, what can we put into those environments, and what can't we? And then what happens when you do that? Much of our world, of course, is regulated, so we're trying to figure out what are the kinds of models might we put into this environment, and how should we use them, and what are the constraints around them. So we're putting our training wheels on, and so there's an awful lot of effort that it takes to be able to figure out what the implications are of all of that. And I think the world is still kind of absorbing that. And there's this idea that, wow, it's going to change and transform us, and it will. But right now, we're in this period of learning. And it's still not the reality. It's not removed a whole bunch of work. It's created a lot of thought-provoking things for us to noodle. But it's not at that point yet where it's taken away a bunch of stuff, and we're not at the point where we're figuring out, oh, this is the machine that's running, and let's look at the bias it's created. And we're operationalizing those models. We're still testing what those are going to look like in a real normal.
When will we be at that point?
It will be at in points, right? So I think I would say that for banking realities, you're segmenting what types of models and what types of business problems and use cases you can put through a quote machine. And that's the point at which we find ourselves at in many of our peers, where you're looking at it almost by use case, to be able to determine what are the right problems that you can leverage. And we've got machine learning happening throughout our organization, and AI applications and chatbots and different types of applications. So they're happening now, but is the entire place a picture of that? Not yet, right? And I think you'll get a mixture of types of analytics over time.
Certainly the fraud warning applications have improved over time. I'm not getting as many false positives for, your visa was used in the wrong place because I happened to travel. So it has learned my habits, and I think areas like that, I'm not in financial services, but thank you for the improvements you're making there.
Well,
On our
Alan,
MasterCard,
so you're speaking about learning, and you've spent most of your career studying, analyzing, and explaining the phenomena of collaboration and various different collaboration techniques, and certainly that kind of fundamental mechanism of doing work has been dramatically impacted by communication technology and by the information technology that's evolved over the last 30 years or so. Going forward, as we're looking at this world with kind of radical automation and AI and 5G, how do you see that very basic construct of collaboration evolving in the next 10 to 20 years?
Well, it's not even 10 to 20 years out. It's interesting what we're seeing happen already today. How many of you have digital colleagues? Do any of you think about the fact that you're actually working with automation today? Anybody use an email package that actually automatically suggests replies for you? guess what? You're actually interacting with the computer that's thinking about those suggestions, or calendaring and scheduling agents that help remove that back and forth of 200 emails to try to book a meeting. We now have AI that can look at people's schedules and optimize meeting times. I have scheduled agents that join all of my online web conferences that take notes for me. There's 3 or 4 organizations out there that have built systems that join your web conferences, do more than just transcribing the words. They actually filter the information during your conferences to flag keywords, follow-up items, et cetera. So my colleagues have actually changed over the last few years. They're not just humans with serial numbers. They're actually bots and things like that that I'm dealing with. So I think we're going to see a progression of that. You use the word, augment or enhance as opposed to replace, which I think is very important. I think everything we're seeing today in the collaboration world is about giving us the capabilities to do our jobs better, not yet at the let's get rid of lawyers stage. I think for knowledge workers, it's about how can, spell checkers didn't put people out of work. The more advanced automation systems to improve the way we work, the way we build content, the way we share information, the way we know security behind who has access to it, all of those things are getting better. They're not replacing my job, but they're giving me the ability to do my work better. And I think that's the direction we're going in, is how can we enhance not just the productivity. I love that you talked about creativity. How can we enhance the creativity of workers to do things they didn't know how to do with images, with video? That's the area that I think we see a lot of investing in, is improving creativity.
So, there have been a number of what I might call kind of fundamental changes caused by technology. Certainly the introduction of the telephone changed the nature of collaboration, right? And the introduction of the internet and scheduling and email fundamentally changed collaboration. And the invention of the mobile telephone has fundamentally changed collaboration. We're now starting to see the increasing use of very high quality dynamic translation capabilities, changing who you can collaborate with and how often. And you've talked about a few of the bot, scheduling sort of things. Do you see any sort of one of those kind of fundamental things that kind of emerges in the near future, that the world was different before it is than it is after?
I think the most significant impact area of AI and data right now are things like natural language processing. I think is the biggest game changer for the way we create and can derive insights from the content. We create so much information, whether it's email or chat or social media or any of these things. We are inundated, we are overloaded with not just the quantity, but the quality of content that's coming at us. AI and data and insights and analytics, that is a massive area for it to be able to analyze everything we're getting, digest it, give us summaries, prioritize things for us. I think that language insight or information insight is going to be the biggest game changer for the next few years, where I can literally turn on my computer and have it suggest, here are the things you should do today. Here are the things that are most urgent. Here are the things that you can put off. We don't have that yet. Every sci-fi show has the digital assistant, whether it's Iron Man with Jarvis or the computer on Star Wars or whatever it happens to be, Star Trek. We don't have that yet. I can't turn on my computer and it have prioritization for what I should be doing. And I think that is going to be a huge progress in our productivity and our accuracy and our efficiency when the systems can kind of glean through all of that content, create us Cole's notes for our day type of thing.
Yeah, and I think it binds together what you were saying is sort of the right brain, left brain, and the emotive element that can dial up what AI has. So I think the content categorization, the classic sentiment analysis, the ability to be able to ascribe a sort of high-level feeling to things, it's been there in basic form, but it hasn't been, the prediction elements of it have not been that great. But as that's refined and as we get that data in and we better understand where the tone is of a particular sentiment, that becomes very different. Right, you understand where someone's mood is, and then you start to be able to understand where their head is at and where their heart is at, and then the ability to predict becomes a heck of a lot different.
So just actually, Sheldon, so I just want to pick up on that, because this discussion about, the insight that we're getting and how that's kind of changing the way that we work and the way that we interact with people and systems. The biggest industry we have out there is the retail space, and this phenomena, we've all seen it as retailing has been radically transformed over the last 15 years or so. Going forward, with some of these building blocks in point, Stephen, how do you see the retail industry transforming even more than we've seen it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a major disruption that's going on, and we're only at, I say, the curve is just starting. We certainly have not peaked in any way at all in that disruption. And it is being very disruptive, mostly because of the online reaction to retail and where retail is moving with a very personal experience. But what's actually effective in there really is that collaboration life cycle. Retail is a collaboration model. It starts with suppliers that are building products that are ultimately looking to get to market for the consumer. That relationship, that collaboration right from supplier to the consumer, that's where actually a lot of AI and machine learning is now starting to really disrupt traditional retail. So the brick and mortar stores are certainly moving fast to catch up with the capabilities that have actually been generated on online retail. All of that is starting to come to bear, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. But it is actually that collaboration life cycle, natural language processing. We're seeing where retailers are now actually working with the suppliers, and they're actually right in store, and they're asking questions, or they're actually figuring out what assortment of products they really need to have based on the personalization of that store. That level of collaboration is driven truly by the data and the machine learning algorithms that are actually being enabled. A lot of it is actually not disrupting jobs, but it is certainly making those jobs a lot faster.
Well, so, I mean, you touched on a really interesting point. I mean, retail is the single largest employer in the economy. And a lot of retail is, some of there's a good portion of it that's kind of minimum wage. And it's, often viewed as kind of an entry-level sort of position. But we're talking about a world that has all of this huge amount of change and this new kind of personalization that consumers are increasingly starting to assume that's there. So if the largest portion of the population is exposed, or the largest single employment sector in the economy is exposed to that level of disruption, how do we incorporate, learning and training, and what happens to that worker base?
It does start really at the front lines, and it's interesting. My 16-year-old self was bagging groceries in a grocery business here in Canada. The reality, it starts there, and actually teaching them how that technology is actually able to be used. Many people may not realize in a brick and mortar world, you're actually finite on price changes by the number of tags that you actually can peel off a shelf and put on. That is actually changing today, where now you have young people that are actually going to be equipped with intelligence in their hand, and they're going to be actually working with machine learning algorithms that are going to do dynamic pricing. And they're actually going to have digital tags that are actually going to be in their stores, and they're going to actually be working with technology a lot sooner. So the reality is you're going to start at a very, very young age and taking advantage of that technology, learning on that technology, and the employers are going to have to make sure that it's at their fingertips. The good thing to realize in today's society, and I have 3 teenagers myself, they're not resistant to it. They're opening it up, welcoming it, and for them, it's a natural extension of where they are today in our society. So I don't see it as barriers. I see it as just the next new skills that we didn't even know that they would be coming into the marketplace with.
Sheldon, you've been chomping at the bit about something.
Oh, no, I just wanted to comment on this idea of AI as a collaborator and a part of your work environment and so forth. The caveat I see is, what does that do to contemplative work? Because when AI is surfacing the answer or what it thinks is your intention so quickly, right? So take something as simple as like WhatsApp autocomplete. Somebody will message you something, WhatsApp has like 3 different recommended responses. None of them are perfect to what you want to say, but they're close enough. And so you hit it without even thinking. When you might have said something slightly different, or there's slightly different nuance and so forth. And so I just wonder about the effects of all this data and the Coles Notes version, as you say. I read Coles Notes in high school because I didn't want to read the novel. Now I appreciate that there's nuance in the novel that the Coles Notes doesn't give you. What is the effect of all this augmentation or all the slicing and dicing of data that AI is doing on your behalf to you as an individual not doing that contemplation yourself? Right? It's a fascinating question. And maybe I sound like the traditionalist, like my mom, who said, don't type at the computer, you should write, because that's the contemplation you need. And maybe, to your point, your children will just adapt to it. But I do wonder about that, the lack of contemplation that all this automation has spawned.
Well, it's a fantastic question, and it's something that I have pushed a lot of the software vendors to think about. When we look at the common uses, we see things like recommended, top, trending. These are the things people are using AI for, and I always say, well, what if we actually provided an opposing point of view? What if I am searching for a piece of content and you recommend the top 10 back, but then you said, not would you like this, sort of like the old Google, are you looking for, but what if you actually gave the opposite? You know, I'm searching for, I don't know, a BMW, and you also told me about, you know, a Honda type of thing. Like, what if the AI actually started to give us opposing points of view to expand us beyond this horrible phenomena of filter bubbles that we're all living in, where the more like content you're surrounded with, the less diverse we become? What if we could actually use the technology to help alleviate this problem that we're currently seeing? You know, you mentioned things like those replies. Let's combine these two conversations, the replies and the personalization for retail. It's actually interesting. I'm not a big WhatsApp user, but you know, Gmail, for example, those 3 recommended replies are not the same for at the individual level, just my responses versus your responses. They actually change based on who you're replying to. And it says, I may say, gee, thanks, Doug. And I may say, you know, oh, thank you very much, Lori. You know, it actually starts to become personalized. You know,
You're welcome.
look at the level of respect, you know. So we are, you know, I love the idea of we cannot become complacent because of technology, I think.
Your comment's interesting, because I think the implication for analytical people is it can take some of the higher order problems, pop them into a machine, and then it bifurcates the analytical workforce. There's the higher order statistician type work where you unpack problems, and you're going to continue to do that. Problems that are thorny, that a machine can't quite tackle, that require some pulling apart before you can actually solve the problem. And then at the lower end of things, you're going to get kind of business analyst type workers, and that mess in the middle, it's probably going to take up a lot of that work. But I think the implication is that much of the thinking changes. Like, we're going to outsource our thinking in a lot of ways, and I think it will change
Quite
that.
sure. I think there's a lot of critical thinking. There's a mistrust to the science behind it when there's
Right
not enough
now.
right now.
But
for sure.
eventually, as you train the models, I mean, just running analytics teams, you will now you're doing things like variable creation, you're looking at the algorithms, you're testing, like you're going through all that rigor. Where after you train the models and you understand the variables, you test the outputs, you have the guardrails, you're going to have a certain level of trust, right? You're going to allow the machine to run to a certain degree. So you're going to spend less time in there, and the byproduct of that, from my perspective, is that you're going to learn less about the underlying variables. You're going to learn less about the business. The analysts will, because they're not going to need to, right, in the same way. So I think you might get an analyst, potentially, with less business acumen, the byproduct. I was just kind of thinking through the implication of your question. And then, you know, maybe those folks who are kind of true PhD statisticians are going to invest their time thinking about higher order problems, and then there's going to be your BAs on the other end, and the machine's taking care of the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we ran into a fascinating situation. One of our automotive clients, who designed the perception system that steers a car, they didn't understand the internal mechanics. They trusted it, and it turned out that the car would turn left with increasing frequency when the color of the sky was a certain shade of purple, right? And
Excellent.
that happened.
Makes sense.
Makes sense. Well, we unwound it, and it turned out they'd done all the training in the Nevada desert when the sky was that color, but they didn't have, to your point, the lower order aptitude to go to the bottom and say, what's the correlation here that the machine is picking up on? And with the increasing complexity of these systems, we're increasingly going to put like this trust in this obscure black box model, and it'll produce phenomenal results, but then there'll be that egregious exception where we suddenly need to get into the inner geometry of it, and that's a challenge.
Oh, yeah, you're kind of circling back to one of the earlier questions I asked about the bias in the underlying data set, right? And when I mean bias here, I'm not talking about it doesn't like certain groups of people, but that because of the sampling database, it learns a behavior that isn't necessarily the appropriate one. In a previous panel we had done, I told that story about these guys that decided to build, one of the best chess engines in the world. And of course, the first thing it did is it fed it all of the games that grandmasters had played against each other, and figuring out they're the best people at chess so you can learn from them. So people started playing chess against this engine. The first thing it did was sacrifice its queen. And it had learned that in grandmaster chess levels, there's certain situations where you intentionally sacrifice your queen, and the time to winning is much less than doing anything else. But that's not necessarily the lesson you really want to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we were discussing, you were discussing earlier, this whole issue about learning. And I can't help, I've still got this, I'm fixated a little bit on the quaintness of the idea that people are still reading novels. So, but you were talking about learning, and it kind of goes, because I actually love reading novels myself, but fewer and fewer people are. And yet we're living in this world where the workforce is being exposed to unprecedented change, and change that even the best of us, or the smartest of us, are having trouble kind of anticipating, because there's so many variables in place. What does that mean to, both kind of corporate training and to the basic fundamental societal educational structure that we have? I mean, what has to change in those two things to allow this next generation workforce to prosper, succeed, adapt?
Well, I'll start because I've got teenagers, as I mentioned, in high school that are starting it now, and I think there's more fundamentals that are necessary at that level. Ability to understand and actually be able to use mathematics rather than just always the fundamentals, and we might have a lot of data scientists in with us, but even the fundamentals are actually sometimes lost when you put them into a practical nature. So I think there's and this is the intent in my mind, that I think there's a business acumen that goes along with the science that is a combination learning that actually starts very, very young. So it's a combination, I believe, in that it continues as young people enter into the workforce, and a responsibility of actually balancing good decision making that's actually an understanding of actually how those decisions are actually being generated through recommendations and how they can be applied, as are brought into workforce. I do believe it actually comes with a balanced human perspective, and it'll likely be that case for the next 10 years or more. And we're gonna need to make sure that that generation that are coming in have actually got that balanced perspective. So it is a disciplined learning perspective society has to actually accept. We often focus a lot on the deep learning, and we're getting some great people that are coming to our society and are actually growing in our country, that are actually both developed here or actually coming in. And that's actually fabulous, but I think we actually need to actually put the balanced perspective to it once we put it into the business workforce. And I believe that right now is a little bit missed by academia, and I think it does need to actually come to the employer as a responsibility if they're gonna really take advantage and put programs in place for that business acumen on top of science.
In our organization and in my past, I've spent a lot of time in the creation of universities that are embedded within the companies. And the three things that we've found that are fundamental to the success of anyone with sort of analytical penchant to be successful in a company, one is the business acumen, like understanding what the heck is the problem that they're trying to solve through data and analytics. So a deep understanding of P&L, the drivers, the business, the competitive forces, like understanding that. The technical acumen, and there's all kinds of augmentations around that and how they're getting to that, whether it's Python or some of the technical coding componentry, but that where we've typically focused an awful lot in gearing up analysts. And then the third piece has a lot to do with soft skills. And the analogy I would offer is an analyst could have the cure to cancer, but if they can't get to those who are afflicted, it's really not useful. And they can't well communicate and summarize and leverage the right instruments in order to get there. And it's been my experience over the years, having run such universities in different companies, that you need the balance of all three in order to be successful. And so we've gone down a path where we've created modules and courses affiliated with all three of those and deployed them en masse to all of our people so that they have the proper curriculum, so that they're successful. And then the academic boards that I've taken part in, of which Queen's is one, and Schulich and some others, have that same sort of balance. Because we've found, obviously, analysts can get up in their head and then they can abdicate certain functions to technology, but in the end, you ultimately need that balance to monetize data and to be able to put the guardrails around it to figure out that it's actually useful, that people will listen to it, that you can make sure that you're not making a silly decision that's going to cause cybersecurity to go squirrely. Like, you need to actually have the presence of mind to know that you're playing with a variable that actually has some end outcome. So I think those are the three things that I've found that you really need, but you need the structure around it to make it quite useful.
I would add, Lori, you know, the ethical considerations now are increasingly important. You know, we're seeing this emphasis on ethical AI, and I thought about your YouTube, or the idea of counter recommendations. They did a study on the YouTube recommender a couple years ago, and they found, I mean, what is Google trying to do when you're on YouTube? It's trying to maximize your time at the site so they can serve more advertisement to you. And so it revealed that when you start watching something, it starts surfacing increasingly extreme content along the lines of what you're watching, so that you go down, as many of us have, the YouTube rabbit hole, and you emerge 2 years later, it'll be 2 years one day, 2 hours later, you know, having spent, you know, wasted time. And this idea of technology becoming more ubiquitous, it needs to be countered by, at the early age, of this ethical consideration of it's not just the capitalistic impulse that has to drive this. And it has to be fused now with real questions about the morality and the ethics of these systems having such large-scale impacts on a large part of the populace.
So that's a really fascinating point, and of course we're seeing this point pop up in all kinds of places. The Cambridge Analytica situation with Facebook, and even just this morning, this whole Face app thing, and you know, are the Russians collecting data that are going to allow us to profile us and follow us through our lives and mess around with us and all that kind of stuff. And we have seen state actors that are using these advanced analytic and AI techniques to interfere with and manipulate, interfere with the electoral process and manipulate public opinion. So, you know, how do we deal with and or train people with the, you know, should we be training people with the critical thinking skills to recognize that kind of danger and assault? Or should we be building counter AI systems as a defensive mechanism to be able to make sure that we understand the veracity of the underlying technology and what the agenda is of the people that are advocating a certain point of view? I mean, how do we deal with that?
It's a balance, and it's an interesting one. Actually, it's interesting to hear that our keynote, Mr. Hickey, got up there and talked about a $1 million challenge to find a new technical solution next year in finding and battling fake news. And that's certainly the personalization reality when there's so much out there with data and how that it can be used in nefarious ways. But a lot of people are also on the pendulum, want to be very personalized in what they're actually offered. They actually appreciate actually having good recommendations or perhaps alternative ways of saying something to get their meaning across. So there is a pendulum there that really comes to how do governments make sure that there's no nefarious manipulation and obstruction of a lot of different things that have been happening both politically and economically. But also, how do we as business leaders find the right pendulum side that we're actually giving people what they're actually looking for? Personalized offers, recommendations, and support in whatever they're trying to do, whether it be a business decision or even a social interaction. So it's not an easy one. And we might do another panel in the same way with philosophers up here to try to actually figure that one out.
Yeah, I think the example is Ender's Game. You know, when you look at this and you think they're doing this nice personalization and teaching kids to play these games and see who's the best pilots, and you end up finding out it's, you know, to save the world and battle the aliens and so on and so forth. And you're hearing a lot of the same things for education now. Who should own the criteria for education and you know, all the certifications that employees are going to get? And when it is taken out of the employer's hands and put into certification boards, who is going to protect and make sure that they're doing the right things? Do we want Google and Microsoft and Apple to own the certification process for what skills we have? Because they could be directing us down the rabbit hole, as you say, of the things that they want. And so there is that ethical question about education and skills and the nefariousness of what direction people are trying to push us in. Hopefully humanity overrules that and we ourselves can tell when we're being manipulated and guided in directions we don't feel comfortable with. I look at examples like, just following in my Facebook feed this week, the 50% that were excited and threw their hands up in the air to get the best Amazon Prime deal they could, and the 50% that said, I'm shopping at my local store because the last thing I'm ever going to do is buy something on Amazon Prime Day. It's that same thing with these tools and AI that we're using. I think same as music and culture and fashion. I hope we see an ebb and flow. And right now we're still working our way up of everyone starting to use these tools. We're worried about what 10 years from now is going to be like and how much they're going to take over. Maybe it's going to be the opposite. Maybe we're going to have this renaissance of not using some of these things for a period of time, and we'll see where that goes. But those are hard things to predict. I've stunned you.
Well, I mean, I'm trying to.
The magnitude of scale of change now is the biggest difference. We like to use analogies of like the Industrial Revolution, how it changed farming, and they're still farmers.
Well, there's not many of them, though. I mean, we used to be about 73%, agrarian, and we're now at 2.8 or something.
Okay.
So that's a pretty big
It's a big
change.
big shift.
It kind of takes us full circle. So you're basically saying that we should put children in simulators and have them run the government.
They would do a better job than what's currently. Whole different discussion.
Indeed,
no,
indeed.
but
Sorry, I think you're on this really interesting point. It kind of circles back to Stephen, something you were saying about, how retail is changing. The advertising business model is so powerful, and when combined with AI and personalization, all these other things, and analytics we've been talking about, the opportunity to kind of bombard us in a Minority Report sort of way with this highly personalized information, and you're talking about these bots that give you different recommendations depending on who you're talking to, and even if I'm driving around with Waze, it's popping up stores that I really ought to go and visit because I happen to be in the neighborhood, and even we talked about the Facebook data manipulation and state manipulation of the democratic process, but even in a more subtle way inside of companies, if the process of building and executing strategies is about taking a very objective look at and evaluating the underlying data and trend lines and finding the patterns without that kind of underlying bias, and yet all the information coming at us has this extremely targeted, personalized bias in it that has something to do with the agenda of the person presenting that piece of very targeted information to us. How do we, in this new world, as workers, sort through all of that such that our composite value proposition actually has value to the companies that we work for?
The analogy I think of for that is everyone in this room has clicked on the banner ad show that Netflix has recommended to you. You didn't go search for it, you didn't know about it, but that first big one that you see up on there, oh, okay, let me check out that episode. We have no idea why they chose that. Is it the advertisers paid for it? Is it based on an algorithm of the things that you've watched? But it influences what we do. At work, we want to be able to surface content in that same sort of way, at least in my world, where we look at customer records, information, content management, knowledge sharing. We all feel that we get lost and inundated, I used the word overloaded earlier, of how much content is out there and what's the right content. Well, when we start deciding what to surface for you, what the top 10 documents are, what the most important things are, how do we know that those are the right ones? And you're saying, how do we provide value back? When I create something inside my organization, I want to make sure it reaches the largest audience possible. So what do? We go off and we ridiculously hashtag the heck out of everything so that we feel like it'll reach the largest audience. And that's such an improper way of reaching things. And hopefully the tools are going to actually analyze the content, do the Coles Note version, whatever we want to talk about, and actually start to find the right things. It's like LinkedIn recommendations. I always say there's 3 types of people on LinkedIn. It's what you say you do, what other people say you do, and then what you actually do. You know, very few people's LinkedIn profile is what they actually do. At work, if we could reach the level of the tools are actually finding subjects, expertise, content, data, analytics, shopping patterns, if it's finding on what's really happening versus what people saying is happening, that's going to be a big step forward and improving that value you have to the company. I think I'm answering your question.
Okay, so Laurie, it's 10 years from now, and analytics and AI and robotic process automation, and we've now these 5G networks, and there's IoT devices everywhere, and you have a newly, well, who knows if your target employee will actually be a university graduate in 10 years because of this kind of lifelong learning, just-in-time learning, and all these alternative learning techniques. But this candidate is now sitting in your office, and you're considering hiring them. What's the essential skill set? What's your interview question template look like? You know, what's the ideal worker is going to look like for you?
I think that fundamentally you're looking for how someone can think and process a problem, which is not unlike what we're looking for today. The tools through which you're going to solve that problem in the future are going to be different and more dynamic, and you're going to draw on different instruments. But I always look for one's ability to solve a problem. And through deductive reasoning, through the balance of kind of emotionality with rationality, the ability to be able to look at multiple forces and go, okay, I'm going to do if this, then that, what they've learned from their experience. Like, I'm looking for people who think well. Full stop. Now and in 10 years from now and in 20 years from now. And I think that we're facing issues with respect to, as we've all been talking about, where we're in the middle of this hailstorm going, okay, well, is it ethical? Does it make sense? Can I make money off of it? Should I use the machine? Should I use this? Should I build that kind of model? Should I use that? If you break that down, it's thinking. Like, it's one's ability to think. It's when to pull up. It's when to move forward. It's thought process, right? So one's deductive reasoning. I would continue to look for that.
Can we train people to think, though, or is that something some people are good at and some people are not?
Well, from my experience, and we've gone through paths of that nature, obviously people have different degrees and ability to think in different ways, but from some of the work that recently went through with MIT, we've gone through paths where we've looked at how do you actually take people with high-skilled deductive reasoning skills and be able to train them to how to solve analytical problems in a better way. How do you show them how it's been done before, and how do you replicate that? So it's not that people have certain abilities to do things at higher or lower levels, so you can show them how that kind of problem had been solved before, such that they can replicate it in shorter order. But I would say that for me, that's one of the things that I would look for now and into the future. I think the issue becomes trickier for us as we go into the future for the leaders of whether it's analytical teams and workforces doing any type of analytics, because I think it's this issue of technology and talent. Like, who's going to do what, in what order? What are you gonna rely on technology for? What are you going to rely on the people for? And I keep coming back to this term of kind of segmenting the analytics, because you're ultimately looking for the greatest yield. And just because a machine can do it, should it? Like, could you get a better yield if you got the 98%? If it's 98% and you're doing fraud prediction or you're managing border control, well, a 1% difference on something like that, and if it's a terrorist threat, big deal. If it's something where it's customer contact optimization and it's one offer versus another, not that big of a deal, I can tell you. So I think it comes down to being able to figure out what is the optimal thing you're going to invest your energy in, and if the combination of a person with technology is going to be the thing that's going to get that greatest yield, then do it. It's a math problem at the end of the day. And then there's thousands of problems you can solve with talent and technology. Where are you going to invest your time? And that's what I spend my time doing in a banking sector. Is it going to be the fraud problem? Is it going to be the cyber problem? Is it going to be the marketing problem? And which of all those things are we going to push technology at, or talent at, or the combination of that? Which of those use cases are going to give the customer the best benefit and the shareholder the greatest benefit? And I think that's the problem we're facing.
Well, one of the biggest kind of challenges, and certainly it's got a lot of press of late, and I think inside of large organizations that I've been part of in the past, this has always been kind of a systemic issue that we've tried to kind of go and tackle, and that is that whether we like it or not, you know, the process of interviewing and hiring and promotion has a bunch of biases involved in doing that, and some of them are overt biases, and some of them are more unconscious biases. And increasingly, I've been reading about just the way that you had AI engines helping radiologists. I've heard of AI engines that are being applied to try to evaluate candidates for both hiring and for promotion in much more objective ways to, on the one hand, try to tamp down or even eliminate some of that bias, and on the other hand, to try to find those diamonds in the rough that may have an unconventional combination of skill sets and experiences that happen to be just the right kind of fit that wouldn't get through the normal traditional sort of interview filters. So, you know, Sheldon, do you see any advances in the AI space that's going to kind of transform that whole process of how to get hired and how to get promoted? And
Again, I think it'll augment the best of our capabilities. I don't think it'll replace our judgment. You know, there's a widespread case with was it Amazon, where the AI system that was trained for HR was biased towards female candidates because it was looking at historical data and it was looking at the self-selection process of Amazon's technical folk who were biased towards male resumes. So can it help us identify certain biases in our selection process? Sure. It's a terribly difficult problem because even if you eliminate certain what we call protected fields from the data set, gender, ethnicity, we have what's called data leakage, where it'll find a roundabout way to trigger on those you know, variables anyways. But it can surface resumes that you wouldn't consider and ones that you would gloss over and give you, you know, to your point, like your top 5 recommendations that you would have chosen anyways and top 5 that you wouldn't have chosen and that you really should look at. And I think then it's in the hands of us to recognize the blind spots that AI has surfaced to us and do something about those blind spots, right? So for like at my previous company, we ran a boot camp with 10 new graduates. And because it was technical, the ratio in the class was typically 7-3 or 8-2 in favor of males. And we eventually learned that in the first couple weeks, we would rank them according to their promise and so forth. And inevitably, our ranking at the beginning of the class was biased towards males and would even out towards the end of the 4-week experience when we could more fully evaluate them. And we looked at that and said, what are the biases that we as a leadership team are bringing to the table that result in this, you know, inequality? So I think AI can help identify blind spots and biases that we have, but to take it a step further, we need to internalize its learnings and recognize what those are. And, you know, to your point, ultimately you're deciding on a candidate that can think, that has a certain level of emotional intelligence, that can do something that a machine can't do yet, and I don't know if it'll ever do. And it can help us, but ultimately it's still going to be, you know, quintessentially human intelligence that judges that candidate, in my opinion.
okay, before we turn to the audience for questions, I kind of had one more and kind of the big question. And that is, this is, you know, we're living this extraordinary age, right? The age of miracles and wonders. And it appears that this is going to be accelerating, that there's these significantly disruptive technologies, many of which have force multiplier effects on each other and are reinforcing each other. And on the one hand, this is extremely exciting because of the unknown potential of it. And it's a great time to be in this area, in this business, because we're dealing with so many unknowns and so many potentials. But it also seems clear, or there's a reasonable extrapolation of, you know, kind of where all this leads, that the fruits of all of this innovation, the fruits of all of this new kind of productivity, and the byproduct of all of this disruption is that the benefits will be unevenly distributed. There are going to be significant winners, and there are going to be lots of left behinds. And, you know, we saw almost a micro version of this during the era of kind of globalization over the last 40 years. And we're now starting to see around the globe the political unrest that is happening because of that. And then we also have these other force multipliers around both economic and climate change migration that are being thrown into the mix as destabilizers. So my kind of question to all of you is, you know, at the macro level, what are the societal implications, and what do we have to do? What lobbying do we have to do with our policymakers to try to create the kind of economy and society that is not only going to tolerate, but allow this new era to deliver us to some, you know, new future potential that we're all going to be comfortable with and enjoy the benefits that accrue from all of this?
That's a huge question.
Well, that's why I said it's a big question.
For us, a difficult one.
We're supposed to be in the Q&A.
It's
Well,
definitely
we
not
got-
going to
we
be,
got 4
it's
more
not going to
minutes.
be a journey that we're going to see end at any point in the near future. It definitely gets into the geopolitical arena. And I think as technology and analytic leaders, I think the biggest thing that we can do to help influence in our own way could be more fundamental and grassroots in nature. And what it really comes down to, if we see those societal opportunities, whether it be working with Kids Help Phone or other kind of ways that we can find that greater good where technology can be applied, more and more examples of that, I think, will lead by example. And when you start taking then that and blowing them up to the macro level, you really are looking to try to see if those kind of things can actually can grow. And I know Kids Help Phone, they actually have worked across the border with some of that, how they've actually used technology that came up out of the US for that texting platform. And it's completely those opportunities that are going to show the way. And I don't know if we're going to have to put all of our trust in the political spectrum to solve this. So I think as leaders, we can actually try to influence from a grassroots movement. I think that's probably the best thing that I can see from the seats that we probably sit in.
So about 11 years ago, I spent some time in Kenya working in a slum, and about 40% of 40% of male employment in Kenya is driving trucks. And recently, we started working with an autonomous trucking company. And so I thought about, like, what are the economic implications if a North American company suddenly automates this in the developing world, and suddenly 40% of Kenyan men are unemployed? And that's kind of the destabilization that you're talking about, and the further division of the pronounced inequalities that we already have. But I do think you are seeing with, you know, Cambridge Analytica and so forth, you are seeing the surfacing of the tougher questions that we haven't asked in the past decade around data privacy and the effects of these technologies. And this autonomous trucking company we started working with, like, they've started to develop an ethical framework around who they sell to, what the displacement is, and they do it partially out of social responsibility, but they do it because it's now beneficial to their brand to be seen as ethical. And so I think there's hope that we've adapted to radical change before, and that we'll do it again. You know, I have an 8-month-old son. It's our first child, and it's been amazing having an artificial intelligence startup in parallel with a biological intelligence startup. And I don't know what kind of world we'll leave for him, but we hope that we'll do as good a job as our parents did in adapting to the radical change. And I don't know if I can offer much more belief than, you know, the idea that we are very adaptable, and that we will confront these challenges somehow.
Yeah, okay. Laurie, Alan, any?
I'm good.
You're good?
I'm gonna team with you on one, because I'm actually gonna steal something you said, because I thought you summarized it so well. Just because we can, should we? I think is a question. You said something about that we should keep in the back of our mind all the time. And the example related to the automation world that I give, I often like tweet or Facebook about, I don't understand the mental process that I myself go through at the grocery store of why sometimes I choose the self-checkout versus sometimes I want to go speak to somebody. I haven't been able to model that in my head. Sure, sometimes I'm busy, but sometimes I want to talk to someone. If I could figure out what drives me to sometimes head to the automatic checkout versus the speaking to the human, then I'd like to be able to model that at work. There's things we should automate. There's things we shouldn't. And I think employers, you talked about employers have a responsibility. I'm proud of the organization I work for is quite well known for philanthropy and helping and not selling to some customers that could be profitable, but industries we don't. All of those things combined. So just because you could, should you, is the last thing that I would say.
Okay, well, that's kind of a really interesting place to start. Why don't we go, how is this going to work? Do we have microphones that are going to move around here? We have one right back there, so let's just get someone that's close to that microphone right in the middle there.
Hi, thank you for all the panelists. It's a very interesting conversation. My name is Sharon Su. I work for Presto. Our organization is going through something that, Lori, you're leading for BMO. So we're thinking of how to build up a data center of excellence. I would love to get all your input in terms of kind of your journey to get there, and what are some tips for you to be successful in that role.
Yeah, so I applaud your efforts, because it's tricky, right, to herd all the cats, right? I think there's a desire to have information in one place and the ability to monetize it. I've been in models that are distributed and models that are more centralized. What I would suggest is the hybrid model sort of works best, right, where you've got people who are connected very directly to the objectives of the business, but then you've got the economies of scale that you get at the center, right? So you're not all buying your own technology. There is some semblance of data governance. So from experience, having worked in different countries and companies, that to me is the model that tends to work the best. And I would say you're at the service of the company and customer always, right? So you have that litmus test first, and you got to kind of fall in love with analytics in the sense that you do it right, but then fall out of love with it because you're at the service of trying to do what's right to drive the company and customer. And I would say that that the structure, we have sort of things where it might seem muddy, but dual reporting relationships, which some people think, that can't work, and it's just a bit of a disaster. But I think you set your ego aside and just try and do what's right for the business. And often these folks report up into technology organizations. I report up into both, into the business and into technology. My KPIs are driving incremental revenue, trying to refine the client experience, and obviously enriching the learning and experience of our employees. So I have a balance, I would say, of good KPIs that I think work for the company and customer. And it's been a journey for us where we had analytics happening in all kinds of different places and then opted to put it in one spot, but with a lot of those dual report lines. And I would say we're not done yet. Talk to me in a year. Maybe you bust it all apart and then put it all back together again. I don't think there's any one right structure. There's always structures for the right time of an organization. I'm happy to chat with you after. I've written some white papers on these subjects here and at my prior life at SAS, and there's different ways you can do this that work depending upon the company's strategy.
Super, thanks so much. We have one question right here in the front row. I'm not sure if we've got someone that can deliver a microphone to this gentleman.
Hi, I'm Tom Somerville. So there was a common thread throughout the conversation about augmentation versus replacement. And Alan, something you said kind of struck me. You said that the spell checkers never cost anyone their job. And I think you'd agree that the word processors that those spell checkers were initially embedded in had a pretty profound effect on the typing pool. So my question really is there a risk that we wind up augmenting the 1% among knowledge workers, and then everybody else kind of winds up on the sidelines?
Who are you defining as the everyone else? The people inside the organization that are not the content creators?
Sure. I mean, knowledge workers is a pretty broad term,
Okay.
and you're going to have a whole spectrum of capabilities and augmentations. And so I worry that some of us will wind up benefiting tremendously, and like everything else, you wind up with this division that will arise.
Absolutely. I think in technology and software, there's always been the standard joke about the 80-20 rule. 80% of people use 20% of the features, but then if you actually work in software, you say, yeah, but it's a different 20 for everybody. So I look at that scenario as similar. I am now able, let me take a real automation thing. Microsoft PowerPoint now has built-in capabilities to design the slide for you. It uses AI, it looks at the colors, and it does things. And it's made my presentations better. Yet, it still requires the expertise of someone who knows how to tell the story. I might create a prettier slide, but I may present it to someone that goes, but it's still not telling the right, here's the problem, here's the solution, here's my recommendation. You mentioned there might be someone that knows how to cure cancer but doesn't know how to get it to reach anybody. I think the automation of these tools is giving us the capabilities to remove the redundant and tedious pieces that we don't want to do. But it is not replacing the necessity for expertise. You know, we all, when we look at analytics or data, the main topic of this, I think everybody agrees, oh, there's truth in data, but you can make data tell any story you want. It's the same thing with content creation or knowledge workers. I think we are automating the things that we don't want to be doing, but that's freeing us up to work on the things that we are wanting to spend our time on. I have been 20 years, you know, in the productivity space, collaboration space, Lotus and social text and Silicon Valley, and I don't go home on Wednesday at noon. You know, everybody's promised me productivity. I've built productivity tools for 25 years. I'm still working X amount of hours a week. I am not concerned yet that these tools are going to replace what we're doing. I do emphasize with your concern that it could create a divide of those that know how to use them and those who do not. And I will give you a tangible example of myself. Some people may have seen earlier at the start of the day, I stood up here on stage and took a picture with a 360-degree camera. I didn't go to film school. I am not a journalist. I don't know how. This technology has become so simple that I can do it now. I worry about, well, are the professionals that need to know how to do those things, am I taking away some of their time? So I emphasize with the sentiment of, are we making things easy enough that we don't need the expertise? But I think there's the balance of there will always be the people that know how to do the things that the generalists don't know how to do.
Well, let me take a quick stab at this, because you're asking a very interesting question, and it's a question that we, the society, has asked many times before, right? It goes right, I mean, well, of course, the Luddites were a very notable example of this phenomenon. Every single disruption, we've asked the same question. And to date, they've all run into what we call the fallacy of lumped labor, that it's not a zero-sum game, right? When all the bookkeepers ran into VisiCalc, and suddenly we didn't have a need for bookkeepers, it turned out that the bookkeepers were the people that knew and understood where all the money was flowing around the organization. And so instead of them being out of business, they actually just moved to a higher value state and became business analysts. And they started using VisiCalc, the thing that replaced their essential functionality. And every single time historically that we've ever run into some sort of fundamental technology disruption, instead of us ending up with a net deficit of productive capacity and the jobs related to that, we've in fact liberated both labor and capital to more productive purposes. That's historically been true. Now, the implication is that in this new world, this phenomena becomes radical and starts happening at a rate and pace and a size, an amplitude that we haven't seen before. And there's going to be a tremendous amount of new value created because of these productivity technologies. And I think the real question, I mean, is two real questions. Number one, will the fruits of that new productivity be distributed in a way across society that allows us to maintain societal cohesiveness and stability? And the second is, are there going to be portions of our population that can't adapt quickly enough? Because every historical example, you know, happened over a period of somewhere between 10 and 80 years. And if these things are happening at, you know, frequencies that are much shorter, how do we reinvent the education system to allow people to adapt to that new frequency? And I think that's a very profound question. Okay, let's grab another question. Well, you have, how about right, who gets the microphone for, okay, right here.
All right, sorry, thank you. My questions, I probably watch a little too much Black Mirror recommended by Netflix.
That's a great show.
Yeah, it is great. But it made me, your stat about the 5 out of 6 children gave me pause and made me wonder, of these 5 jobs that we don't have a name for right now, in the future, how disparate will these jobs be? And we're moving towards augmenting our jobs through automation. And right now, especially in Toronto and Canada, we celebrate diversity and everyone being different. But have we noticed, or are we in a danger zone where we may actually be not celebrating diversity, but moving towards almost too much uniformity? And I think of this right now. Like growing up, I thought my mom was the best cook, and my friends' moms weren't very good. But now, my kids, we all just go to the internet and use the same recipes now, if we cook at all. And so we don't even have variability in our food that we eat. So have we missed this, or is this something that we're in danger of? That's my question, I guess.
That's a really interesting question. Does this ability to take insight from large data sets and then deliver it situationally actually drive us towards more uniformity instead of diversity?
Actually, I think there is perhaps some uniformity. If you're buying HelloFresh, everybody else in the neighborhood's got HelloFresh. You're all eating the same meals. There are great examples of where that actually uniformity is probably playing itself out. But I actually believe, and I've seen, that it's also being an enabler for diversity. People that actually have disabilities are now actually finding gainful employment into the workforce that are enabled by technology, enabled by supporting kind of capabilities on communications or other things that they couldn't have done before. So I think that it actually is a bit of a balanced, and certainly in certain areas you might see that it's expecting everybody to act and be the same. But I do see that it actually is an unlocking of a potential side of our society that perhaps has been marginalized. And certainly I think that that's some great success stories, certainly in the autism spectrum space, that I'm very aware of, that I think actually companies are doing great in. And I think it's actually a balanced one right now. But it does come back to the businesses that have to bring that ethical value and that proposition to play. Yes, I mean, we could all expect everybody to work and operate and eat the same. But I think it's a higher level order expectation that we have as business leaders to drive, to find the edge and include it.
I want to be optimistic for a minute. We talk about technology with this darkness around it, the Black Mirror reference so much. I don't want us to forget that we're humans. At the end of the day, everyone here is wearing something different and listens to different music and drives a different car and works at a different company and votes for a different political party. And we've had technology for 100 years that's been driving us towards that possibility of conformity. I'm not as concerned as I think we may overhype that all of us are going to end up as autonomous drones, doing the same thing and speaking the same way. I just don't want. I think humanity still.
Let me just challenge you a second, just because one of the biggest phenomena that I lived in as you know, well, we both lived in the U.S., but I lived in the U.S. for 17 years. I've somewhat recently returned, and increasingly, because of this personalization of information, people are getting their information and their worldview from a source that is confirming the worldview that they hold, and it's tribalizing everything. So yeah, I suppose there's diversity in that there's a number of tribes, but increasingly we're all finding ourselves, because of this wonderful technology, having this tremendous reinforcement around the boundaries between our tribe and the other tribes. How do you reconcile that?
I just look at something as simple as whatever the most popular thing of the day is, like, boom, right inside my own circle with my own filter bubbles, work colleagues, sports colleagues, family, friends, lots of different circles. You take anything. Game of Thrones. Half of the people loved it, half the people didn't. No matter what the most popular thing is, I still tend to see that there is diversity. I mentioned earlier, what's your Netflix queue and what's it telling you to watch? Most of my friends ask each other what things they should watch, and they don't rely on that algorithm. And I still think there's some humanity in our world that is driving the sports we choose to play, the teams we choose to watch. We all jumped on the Raptors bandwagon. Are we going to watch them next year when the team's different? I just don't want to, at work, same thing. Let's bring it back to work. I think I watch my team and the people that report to me, and I give them the same question. and I get back 3 different answers still. We haven't become robots yet.
Can I add to that? I was at a conference in Paris called Hello Tomorrow, which is about taking deep tech for human sustainability. Just your project had to be to better the planet. And let's not discount our ability, our humanity, and the extent to which we can combine that with these latest tools for positive innovation, right? The gentleman who won that contest, who's originally from Nigeria and lives in Toronto now, he took a very simple problem, which was fake pharmaceutical drugs in the developing world that kill about 1 million people a year, because he was a victim of it at 16, and he invented a mobile system that uses machine learning to authenticate it on the spot. And it's radically going to change and address a really significant problem. You know, another attendee lost her grandfather because of organ transplant and is using AI to do that. So, like, you're right. We talk about the darkness of AI and it's scary and so forth. Let's also not forget the radical innovation that is going to come about because of the unique humanity that we're capable of coupling with the tools.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's bad in data helping birds of a feather flock together and find one another. And if you find a common recipe on Epicurious, knock yourself out. I'm a cook, I love it. If we cook the same thing and we chat about that and we like it and we alter ingredients, excellent. But I think foundationally, the ability to be able to find common threads in data is a good thing. And I'm with you. I don't see storm clouds, I see sun.
Okay.
And so I think it's actually, the world is going in the right direction. And of course, there's always people who are going to take us down a negative path. But by and large, I think we're in a reasonable space, right?
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap up, but I think some of us are still going to be around for the lunch, and I'm sure we'd be very happy to engage and discuss any questions. But just as a way of wrapping up, you know, we've kind of been, it's a very, very big topic. We've been all over the place, and this discussion about kind of the light and the dark side of this is, I think, actually not a bad place to kind of end up. But let me just kind of go across, and just each one of you, you know, give me a view of whether you're kind of optimistic about how all this plays out, and, you know, the 3 reasons why you take that position, or if you're concerned or pessimistic or see pitfalls, and what are the 3 reasons that that you would highlight to be things that we ought to worry about. So we'll start at the very end, and we'll just kind of move this way. So, Sheldon.
So as you guys probably determined, I am optimistic. I don't know if becoming a recent father has resulted in that new optimism. I actually did an engineering degree, but I also did a theology degree in my previous life. And for me, the fascinating question is, like, what are the existential questions that AI and the journey it takes on is going to answer? You know, we shared this on the panel. Or cause, but
super intelligence.
You know, the idea of genuine thinking machines on some level. It's been remarkable to see the progression of my son from, you know, a blob that just needed to be fed every 2 hours to intentionality and so forth. And so the capabilities of machines to somehow get us into that mystery, to me, is a fascinating thing.
Of course, at some point in life, he's going to be marveling at how you transform from a reasonable thinking thing into a blob that needs to be fed 3 times a day.
I think he already does sometimes. But, you know, last thing. So my wife is a psychiatrist, and she finds this this whole subject fascinating, because her claim is that there are some things a machine just will never do. You know, really connect emotionally with a human in the context of a human relationship. And so, to me, these are all tools to enhance humanity. And yes, you know, there's danger zones. We've had the ability to obliterate ourselves for 60 years, 70 years with nuclear weapons, and we're here. You know, I think I'm optimistic about what these tools will do for our humanity, not scared of them.
Okay, Stephen, we've got a couple minutes left here, so what do you think?
Cooler heads will prevail. I mean, in the trend of human nature, I think I'm a total optimist to believe that society, we will actually find great use of these technologies, these tools, the analytics capabilities. I think we will find it to enable those that actually may get displaced from jobs, and it'll find new ways of actually finding work or actually being able to actually leverage information and data. We are going to live a data world. I actually am a big proponent of using it. That's obviously my career. But I'm a big proponent that I want it to be used for me, for good.
Okay.
And I believe that actually there is great opportunity, and so I'm leaning hard on the optimism.
Laurie?
Yeah, completely agree. I'm in the sky is bright, and I think from analytical practitioners' perspective, we just continue to reinvent ourselves and solve other problems, and I think some of the greatest opportunities for advancement are be in the healthcare space to prolong our quality of life and solve some of the medical issues that are before us, which I really look forward to.
Okay, and for a contrary position?
You
That'd
put,
be you.
put five
I'm
Canadians
guessing.
on stage and everybody's happy and everybody's in agreement. Optimistic work for me. My Fitbit tells me if I took enough steps during the day, and if I didn't, I go off and fix. I'm going to see that at work within the next 5 to 10 years. I'm going to have tools that are going to help guide me and let me do my job better.
Yeah, that whole Fitbit for work idea, I wish we had some more time to look into that one, but maybe that'll be a
to anybody
topic for
at
next
lunch.
year's conference.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you very much to our panelists.